Hello and welcome everyone, and this is the Velero community meeting and open discussion. Today is December 1st, 2020. We're in the last month of 2020. We're almost done, everyone. So we got some status updates, and then we'll dive into a demo with Carlisia later today.
Hey, Jonas, that's a really cute picture of a little
I'm sorry.
pink.
I'm sharing the wrong thing. There we go. That should work better, right?
No, it looks half as good now.
Now I don't have to be reading your texts.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. So yeah, let's start with some status updates. First up, we got Carlisia.
Yeah, it's December, y'all. Almost done with this year. So, woohoo! I'm on community support this week. I did an internal presentation yesterday to help people who do support that includes Velero support. I finished, so my fun project last week, that was a holiday week. I didn't take any time off. So I worked on this tilt setup. And so there's a PR for it. I'm waiting for reviews. So what it does basically is speeds up development considerably, and it's pretty cool. Just in a matter of seconds, you can update the Velero code base or any of the plugins, and that just the binary gets rebuilt, sent to the container, but the container doesn't get remade. It just gets restarted. So in a matter of, you don't have to do anything manually. You don't have to reset the image. It just restarts and you have your code change. So that was what I worked on last week. And what else? So we have so many PRs. So I want to go through them and see if I can help. I don't know. I don't remember anymore what PRs I haven't reviewed. So I want to go through them and see if I can move things along. And starting to get, there are some CLI issues that we slated for 1.6. So I want to get started on them, especially the ones that are going to be needed for setting secrets, which is something that Bridget's going to be working on. So I want to get those out of the way first, and just thinking if there is any way I can set up for when we do have multiple secrets to already start facilitating that. That's it for me. And I'll do a demo of the tilt thing when the discussion topics come up.
Awesome. Any questions, comments for Carlisia? All right. Carlisia, any blockers this week?
No, I just think in general, we are, I don't know, we have a lot of PRs to review. I have a PR that's been sitting there for a long time. In that, I don't know. That's it.
All right. Sounds good. Next up, we got Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So as Carlisia mentioned, I have been working on the design for multiple credentials support, among other things, but this is the one piece of work that I'm really going to be trying to focus on now. I did make some updates to the design doc and marked it as ready for review. So if I get some input or some feedback from others on the team, that'd be really great. It does need a little bit more thought and consideration for the impact on upgrades and also Helm. I do have some thoughts on that, and I will update the doc further, but I marked it as ready for review now so that I can get some input on it in the meantime. So yeah, other than that, I've just been doing various other PR reviews, and I spent some time in community support last week while other folks were out for Thanksgiving. I'm in Canada, so I didn't have the time off. And also just made some small changes to our CI process as well to upgrade the Docker actions that we were using, because we were getting some warnings in our CI builds related to the versions that we were using. Yeah, that's it for me.
All right, sounds good. Any questions, comments for Bridget?
Are you going to take the PR that's existing for multiple credential support or open a new one, or how are you and carlisia going to proceed with that?
So I've just updated the existing PR that's there. So I had written some comments. carlisia and I had a discussion about it. And during that, we decided just to update the existing doc that was there. A lot of the content was still applicable. So it was more just building on what carlisia had already done. So it's still the same PR.
Gotcha. Thanks.
All right. So do you have any blockers this week, Bridget?
No blockers, but I'll try and set up some time with carlisia to talk about the next steps for the CLI changes.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, Nolan.
Not a whole lot of updates from me. I planned to work last week, but unfortunately I took bereavement and then holiday. Today or yesterday, I was catching up on PR reviews, got several of them merged. There are some larger design docs that haven't gone in just because of how big they are and time and it takes to review them. But we got a bunch of things reviewed here. So yeah, that's basically all I have for today.
Sounds good. Any blockers for you this week, Nolan? Anything you need help with?
I think right now is going to be getting the design stuff out. This is in the community shoutouts, but one thing I do want to highlight is Genting actually started taking the command line stuff. He started grabbing some of the CLI work, so that is moving along. And yeah, if we can move through these, that would be great. And I missed some of the community shout outs from last week. In my script only has a 7-day window, but there were several other design docs that got merged late, I think last week or the week before, that I'll need to dig out and thank people for and let them know they got merged.
Sounds good. All right, let's dive into the discussion topics. Carlisia, you got a demo. I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, let me try to do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let me start. I was just trying to pull out my PR and show the documentation. Sorry, I didn't do this before. I was trying to get to it. All right, so basically I wrote a documentation to help people understand what this is and how to set it up. If you do want to just do it without really getting into it, there is a TLDR. It's very, very straightforward. So basically, I'm going to show you, there is this, let me make this bigger. There is this tilt resources folder with an examples folder. So you just drop all of this, will have your personal tilt settings already filled out. If you have your plugins in the parallel directory to Velero, in the directory parallel to Velero, this will just work. Your cloud credentials will go here. Because I use Minion, mine is just like Minion 123. This is a sample Velero deployment. It's already ready to go with all the plugins set up. So the 3 plugins that we support are included here. There is a rustic deploy daemon set as well. So if you want to deploy that, you just put on the tilt setting, you say set up rustic, you change it to true. The setup menu is if you want to run menu in a cluster. So the tilt file will fetch from this examples folder has a menu deployment. So we will just point to that, load that into the cluster. The menu will be up and running. You can use that. So, and then inside the config directory, we have is where our CRDs reside, and we have sample files there. So we also point, you should copy this into the root of this tilt resources directory. Like I have mine set up here. And then just set up if you're using menu, all you have to do is make sure the URL is correct. Did I miss anything? So this customization, this customized file will set up the credentials exactly how Velero expects it, at least the way it works now. And all you have to do is, again, drop that cloud file. It needs to be named clouds because reasons. And so you just drop that folder under the tilt resources. I mean, the file under the tilt resources folder. Make sure you get your credentials, whatever the provider you're using. And then, yeah, so this is what it looks like. Let me bring this up. I'm gonna run to show you what it looks like. So here on my right, I have my terminal is in that directory on my on the branch for that PR. So I just do, because those files are set up, I do tilt up, and that's it. So it's going to give me the URL for where things are going to load. You see the plugins already loaded, and it's building. I have it set up to load everything just to demonstrate. So the plugin binaries are all built already. I mean, okay, so disclaimer. I had already run this, so I think Tilt might have, let me think through this. I don't know if there was something that already was preloaded in the cluster. So it didn't build from scratch. Building from scratch would be like a little bit longer. So Velero was already installed in my cluster, yes. So the second time you run, it will be this quick. And there's some warning here, it's just saying if I use the kind local. All right, you don't have to, okay, so one warning here is saying, oh, I don't have customized installed, but they use the kube control customized, so that still works. And is also saying if you set up a local registry for kinds, this will be even faster. And I haven't done that yet. But you can, those are just warnings. If you do have a build failure, see this warning here right at the bottom where my cursor is. So there's an error. If you have a build error, not like an error message, but a build error, it will show up here. Now, so you have the logs tab, and if you go to the Velero, sorry, either the rustic deployment or the Velero deployment, if you have any logs, I mean, the Velero deployment will always have this running log. It will show up here. And as you make code changes, I'm going to put this on the right. Bring out my editor. I'm going to close this. I want to show a code change so you can see how quick the code change gets reflected. So one of the directories we are watching with this configuration is the package directory. So we are watching the whole thing. So I can go here, and I know the backup storage location controller runs continuously. So I can say, and I also have configured the Velero deployment. Sorry, before I show the code change, let me just show something that I really like too. So the Velero deployment that I have here, if I make any change here, it will also rebuild, restart the container, rebuild the binary and restart the container. So it will reflect immediately. And so let's say, so now I have the deployment set to debug, and I add, I just wanna, how do I make this show up in that log that's running with so many things? There are so many messages there. Maybe this will be obvious. So I'm gonna save. The first thing that happens is that, see the Velero manager here on the right? That's the actual Velero binary. So it's being built. It's like, it's just a go build of the source code. It's being done. That's happening locally. So now the Velero deployment is restarting. So this means the binary was pushed to the container, and the container is only restarting. It's not being remade. And that's what makes it super fast, because you don't have to rebuild the container itself. You're not pulling images from anywhere. And so let's look for this message. Oh, I have to. It hasn't finished building yet. Please work. Sometimes it's faster than other times. But you get to see everything that Tilt is trying to do. And here's the message that I added, see? So they had already, yeah, that was, and that message is gonna pop up again because this is going to keep looping. So that's it, ta-da. Questions? And then there's the Tilt file. I try to document it. Oh, by the way, I copied the setup that Cluster API used. Andy Goldstein set this up for Cluster API, and I copied and tweaked to make it fit for Velero. And I try to document things that were not super obvious. So basically, this part is just setting up the Velero deployment, and then this is setting up any plugin that you have configured to use with the Tilt setup. And with that in mind, I just remembered one thing that we need to use any plugin. So I have PRs for each of our plugins, the plugins that we support, with this file here, tiltprovider.json. So you have to give it a name, because this is the name that when you say, oh, let me show you some, sorry, slowing down. All right, so you have this set up, and all you do is you say, what if you weren't running with Tilt, what image would you use for this plugin? So you don't have to give it a version, you just give the image a repo and name. You point to what directory you want to reload, and you also point to where the main .go file resides. In our case, it coincides to be the same directory, but with other plugins, they might have that somewhere else. And you give it a name, and this name is the name that you will specify here in your personal setup file, which is under the tilt resources folder, you have this tilt settings, which is your personal settings. And here, when you say enable providers, you use that name, the name that was used in the config for the provider. And these are the providers that are going to show up here. So you have to do two things: to enable the provider you want, and also point to where the repo is, so it can even find that config file. Now you can specify all the repos here, and if you just delete these things. So I'm going to show you how. Okay, my Vim just stopped working. And so, gosh, demo, nothing's working. Okay, there's a properly formatted JSON. So immediately those binaries got unlisted, and all I have is the AWS binary here. So the tilt file, I just tried to document things that weren't obvious. Should be pretty easy to understand. So the two main things are this local resource function this is a tilt function. It builds the binary, and this Docker build is what is also a tilt function, because there's some Python code here, as people may recognize. So this function is what takes that binary, puts in the container, and restarts the container. So for the plugins, just as a heads up, the plugins, because they go inside the init container, it would be awesome if we had a way to just put the binary in the Velero container that's already running in that deployment. But unfortunately, it will trigger a restart of the Velero container. But still, it's relatively fast. And if you look at any rate, if you look at, where is my thingy? I was just adding a comment to Nolan's question on my PR. And I took a screenshot of like the make container. That takes almost 5 minutes to run. And this, might take 14 seconds, depending on what it is you're doing. So that's it. Questions?
I think you hinted at this, but the tilt file, is that basically a Python file that gets invoked? Like when I was reading it, it looks like it's a Python file that has some well-defined functions like Docker build and some you define yourself.
I'm concerned to say the wrong thing because I didn't.
Okay,
I don't know. So I don't know if so. These functions here are definitely Python functions, and I'm saying this because I don't know if you know, because I'm not a Python. I'm not super well
it
versed
looks
with
a
Python.
lot like Python.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it's a Python. And if you go to line 1, very top, I bet it's just Python, and they just interpret it. I don't know how tilt runs, but it probably says invoke the Python interpreter.
Yeah. So what I don't know, that this is definitely Python code. What I don't know is if you can use other languages here, or it has to be Python.
I bet
I don't know.
Python.
It might. Yeah.
Yeah. I bet it's like Vagrant. The Vagrant file is like a Ruby file. I was mostly curious because like the thing I find interesting, like if you look at line 77, if you scroll up a little bit from there, so line 74 to line 80, they're doing things like making chunks of a Docker file and like appending them together, which is interesting.
It's what makes it faster, because you are excluding things that for development purposes, you don't really gonna care about.
Sure.
And then, of course, if there are things that we would care about and I just didn't realize, we can always add here. But I left a comment on the PR saying basically, I might have been misunderstanding what you were trying to say on that PR, but we'll circle on that later.
Yeah, I saw that. And the thing with Velero plugins, yeah, since you're modifying the container, whether it's an init container, or I'm sorry, since you're modifying the deployment, whether it's an init container or the container itself, that's gonna cause it to restart.
Yeah, it has to happen.
Yeah, that's just a cube thing.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Freeze. There we go, and now we're back. Sorry about that, folks. The host unfortunately quit, so now I'm the host again. So we'll get started again. Yeah, you were talking about Tilt. You were having a discussion. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so if anybody has questions about the setup that I was showing, any more questions? Oh, by the way, you can just switch contacts to an entirely different cluster, like could be AWS, and run Tilt up, and boom, you got the whole Velero setup installed. Does
it use like kubectl's context?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whatever your kube config is pointing to as the context. So
Nice.
it just doesn't care.
Nice.
It's really cool. Thanks, Carlisia. I think the thing that I'm probably most excited is maybe not about like the speed of it, but one thing that I tend to have issues with is sometimes I'll make changes and then I'll rerun things, but maybe I haven't rebuilt it, and then I'm like, why are my changes?
I've done that so many times.
Yes, I think just having that just all automatically just happening behind the scenes is really cool. So thanks for putting in all the time to get this working.
I've been relying on Octant a lot. For like 80% of the reason why I rely on Octant is just to go to the Velero deployment and see what image is there. And then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so that's not the image version that I should be using because I didn't build it or I didn't send it.
Yeah, I think this is a nice middle ground between running it completely locally and having it in a cluster. And it includes something that I think web development folks have had for a while, which is there's a depths line, which I think, if I'm understanding what it's doing correctly, it's watching for changed files.
Yeah.
And if those files changed, then it will do the build and shove the executable up, which means you don't have to think about it. Tilt does it, which is really nice.
Yeah. And you can make changes to other things that will not, of course, if it's not things that are not being watched, not going to trigger our builds, but things that you want to trigger build definitely will be included there and it will happen that way. But yeah, but I think for me the speed is huge. And not having to, like, if I do have to run things in a cluster as opposed to locally, you have to make container, which takes 5 minutes. Then you have to set the image so the image can go to the cluster and be updated. And that's like, okay, and now I'm like checking Twitter. So anyway, and how easy it is to onboard people too. So you're just like, hey, drop these files, change 2 things, and you have Velero up and running in a development environment that you can start changing and poking around.
Yeah, it's a huge improvement.
Anyway, please review my PR because I want to merge this and start using it.
I'll do that this afternoon.
This is awesome. Thank you, Carlisia.
Sure.
All right. Do we have any other discussion topics anyone want to bring up for today? All right, then we'll dive into community shoutouts. Ola.
Yeah, so this is, hopefully I got everything. I went through and got some of these manually. First, we've got a design doc from Scott Seago over at Red Hat for updating our RestoreItemAction plugin interface to have a wait functionality. Basically, we have these additional items that can be returned by RestoreItemActions, and there are situations where it's useful to wait for those additional items to be restored before continuing with the current item. I won't dive too deeply into that, but that got merged almost 2 weeks ago now. So thank you, Scott, for your patience and that proposal, because there's stuff we can use that for in core Velero. Next, Pranav, also from Red Hat, proposed a design for reporting restore progress. This is for the Kubernetes objects, not necessarily volumes, but it essentially introduces 2 passes on the restore. So it will say, here's a list of the objects we expect to restore, and here's where we're at. And yeah, that will be super awesome. So again, also a couple weeks ago. Next, we have collaboration. Two folks put this in. There was a bug that the scheduler, when creating a backup, didn't pass annotations down to the backup correctly. So this change fixes that, and the schedules will now pass any annotations applied to them onto the backups that they create. So thank you to Funky Code and Michael for making this. This next one is pretty small, but still it's very, very helpful. From Tick Kim, I think. I apologize, I probably pronounced that incorrectly. But basically a typo correction on an internal function name. So thank you very much for cleaning that up. We have some documentation instructions from Madhav that basically let people know what they need to do to clone the repo for downloading examples. Thank you very much, Madhav. What's this next one? Yes, so this is from Jen Ting. This is part of some CLI reworks that we were doing. And this is kind of one that probably should have been around for a little while, but Genting added the ability to delete a backup storage location via a Velero command rather than doing a kubectl delete. So you can do it via Velero backup location delete or Velero delete backup location. So thank you very much, Genting, for adding this feature. Really appreciated. Next, because my script wasn't updated to add Dave as a contributor, Dave and Ashish have been working on getting our end-to-end test framework integrated. So I'll still call this out because it's really good progress. Ashish has a PR for getting actual tests out there, but this is the framework for getting it spun up and run against clusters of any cloud provider, basically.
Yep.
So,
sorry, I was running a little late from a previous meeting.
yeah.
I was hoping to demo the end-to-end tests or demo my PR today.
Oh, sure.
But we may. I will do that if we have time at the end. I don't want to hijack the rest of the agenda.
Yeah, we certainly could.
Oh, with that in mind, I have to look. I have to dig through the documentation to see. When I run go test after I merge the tests, it fails. So is
I can look at that offline.
yeah.
I think there are 2 more contributor shoutouts. Nolan, do you want to run through them?
Sure. Yeah, we can finish those up. These 2 are from the Helm chart. So I have not looked at these as closely. The first one is from Damoon. Let me open this up. Looks like there's some DNS issues. So the DNS policy was not being passed down correctly. Looks like in both cases. Let's see. Yeah, so this fixes it so that a DNS policy can be passed down. The Moons actually relies on Jared Allard's. So these changes allow for a DNS policy for the cluster to be passed down into both the Restic daemon set and the Velero deployment. So thank you both for, yeah, these 2 are dependent, it looks like. So thank you both for contributing this. Setting this DNS policy is actually pretty nice. So thank you very much for your contributions.
Awesome. So Ashish, do you want to demo your work?
Yep.
Awesome.
So let me just share my screen first. No, why is the share button and leave button like so closely located? So while I was waiting, I just started this E2e tests that I have running. So what I have so far, actually, let me share my PR because that is more easy to talk about. So share my, yep. So this is the end-to-end tests that I started, more end-to-end tests that I started adding. Basically some refactoring and how we want to install Velero. So previously we were expecting, or as part of the previous foundation work that we had, that Dave had put up, we were expecting Velero to be installed in the cluster before we are able to run tests. But the change that I have so far installs Velero before running the test and cleans up Velero afterwards. This will allow us to customize Velero installations for the test that we want to run. So I'm still continuing to use the Kibishi workload that Dave had set up initially to backup and restore, and still using Restic. Not made progress into using the volume snapshotter plugins, but that switch should be pretty straightforward, I expect. Famous last words. So that's what I have so far, excepting this is how somebody would run the test with these configuration files or these configs, path to a credentials file and the bucket and the prefix and stuff, the BSL and the VSL config. So this is the part which installs Velero before every test. And this is the part that cleans up Velero. And here in this case, in this test, I happen to be running the Kibishi tests in AWS using Restic. using AWS as a backup storage location and resting. So the way I have kind of organized the tests is this is a common test function, and this is a file that is specific to AWS tests. So all AWS, I'm expecting all AWS tests to go into this file, and this run Kibishi test happens to be the first or one of the tests that we want to run. Similarly, to kind of draw comparison or to compare and show, this is a similar test for Azure. Again, running the same tests, but installing Velero for Azure using the cloud provider related configuration and credentials. So that is what I have going so far. This is PR3111. So take a look to give you all a demo of how this thing works. I have a kind cluster here. And that's running on my laptop, and I don't have Velero installed. And actually, these don't matter, but I can clean them up. My install only deletes the namespace, but it should also delete the CRDs. Okay, now I also shouldn't have any CRDs. Now this is how I invoke the, I have an environment variable setting all of these so that I don't disclose my subscription account and all the other secrets. So I am in the E2e test directory. Yeah.
Are you meaning to share your terminal?
Sorry.
That's all right.
Thanks. So this is the command that I ran earlier, and I realized the CRDs were still hanging around. So I deleted them and here, and then now I don't have any Velero CRDs. So that's all you've missed so far from my terminal session. So now I am in the E2 test E2e directory, and I'm running this make target with all of these configurations. I have environment variables set up for all of these, and that way I don't disclose secrets on my demo. And it is using these credentials or credentials in this file. And I run make run. What this is going to do is it is going to build the tests, and then first it's going to fetch Ginkgo, and then it is going to run. Oops, I just did disclose my storage account and subscription ID. Didn't I? Crap. I will figure out how to clean that up later on. So what this did is it is running this test, and then it is doing. It is installing the CRDs, the regular Velero installation and all that. And then it is waiting for the installation to be ready. And once it is ready, it is going to create this workload, which is again like the Kibishi test or using the distributed data generator or the Kibishi and setup that we have or the Dave setup. And it is going to generate some data by running this script. These magic numbers, or what seems as magic numbers, is how much data we want Kibishi to be generating and at what hierarchy. So that could use some polishing. So now it generated the data. Now it is trying to take a backup of Velero. And the other interesting bit here is it uses this local installation, local binary of Velero to create backup and to create restores. Now, it did run backup. It did confirm that the backup completed successfully. And then to simulate a disaster, it removes this workload namespace, and now it is restoring. Now, once the restore is complete, it will verify that the data that was generated before is restored correctly while we wait for this restore to finish. And while we wait for this to happen, okay, so now it is running verify, which is again like the same magic numbers. While we wait for this to like complete successfully, are there any questions that I can answer? And the other interesting bit here is when I ran this make, I said Ginkgo focus Azure, which meant it skipped certain tests. It says we'll run only one out of the 3 specs. So there was the AWS related tests and also another dummy test suite that I had. It skipped over because I had Azure focus on Azure. That is all coming from, that is filtering based on these labels. These are not, this is not any syntax specifically, this is just plain strings. I added these box brackets around them to make them seem like labels. So that way it is easier to discover and filter.
I think that Ginkgo Focus can use regular expressions as well.
Yep,
if I remember correctly, it's the same thing that we used in Sonoboy for targeting specific conformance tests.
Yep, those are regular expressions that you can use. You're right, Bridget. So it ran the Velero the Kibishi verify stuff, and it confirmed that the workload was backed up and restored successfully, and everything passed. Going to switch back to my PR real quick to show the code that I was running. So if I say run Kibishi tests. So this is the run Kibishi tests method that it does. I'm using like timeouts to control. So what this test does is creates the namespace, installs Kibishi, goes to the install Kibishi, goes to this repo to fetch the YAML for the specific platform. This is the platform where the cluster is. That way it knows which storage class to use and all that. So even though I'm testing the AWS plugin, I pass in kind here so that it gets like a storage class specific to my to the platform on which the cluster is running. So it installs Kibishi, generates data, it backs up the namespace and simulates a disaster by deleting this namespace. And then it'll restore that namespace from the same backup that we took here. And once the restore is complete, it'll verify this, and later on as part of cleanup, it'll also delete the namespace that it created. So this way, on the same cluster, I can run AWS related tests, and I can also run Azure related tests. So I just ran the Azure related tests. Now I'm going to go to see how I can run the AWS related tests. More Azure. Oh. Yep. So now on the same cluster, I did not reinstall the cluster. On the same cluster, I'm going to run AWS related tests, which is going to run the same test, but on using AWS as the backup storage location. So it is waiting for the Velero daemon set, Velero deployment to be ready, and then the resting daemon set. And then the good thing about AWS is, one, I did not disclose any of my secrets running the AWS tests.
Did you want to be showing your terminal now again or no?
Come. That's one way not to disclose secrets. So this is how I ran the AWS specific tests, Ginkgo Focus AWS, using these credentials, and this is the bucket that I wanted to store the backups in. Yeah, now it installed Velero. Now it created the workload that we want to back up and restore. Now it is generating some data. It is going to run the same tests, but on using AWS as the object storage location. As next steps for this PR, once this, I will probably be taking this out of work in progress sometime today, after finishing a couple of, after tidying up a couple of things that I had in mind, and then work on more tests once that gets merged. I think I cut you off, Nolan.
I had a question about the setup with Kibishi, and specifically with Kibishi. Is there a set of methods for like before and after tests to set up stuff so that you don't have to install Kibishi in each test? So I know some test frameworks have like the functions have different names, but they have a before each test run this and after each test run this.
Yeah. So here Kibishi, the way we are using Kibishi is we have a sample app using Kibishi, which has a specific environment that it is expecting. So the way Kibishi works is it needs to have certain scripts and commands or tools available on the container for it to run to verify data. It just does. So for that reason, this is the workload and Kibishi is like totally tightly coupled right now. So we will want to decouple that to make the data verification part like a separate tool from the actual workload. So today they are like super tightly coupled, and that's why the installation of Kibishi is tied into the deployment of the workload.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, this test ran on the same cluster using AWS as the backup storage location, and it cleaned up everything that it created. So this will kind of give us like a way to spin up Velero installations, take them down, and run for each test. That's how we handle Nolan. To get back to your previous question, it is using the before and after methods that we handle installation and cleanup of Velero. So that's the demo that I had.
This is awesome. Thank you, Ashish. We're almost at time as well. So I want to thank everyone for joining today. And yeah, please try out the testing. Please try out the tilt that Carlisia built out. And with that, see you all on Slack, and have a great rest of the week, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
folks.
everyone.